The Sports Shuffle. Normally do this pick show in a couple days from now over the weekend, but due to travel issues on my
Yes,
end, we got to do
since
it tonight. So,
you're not like Wayun from Deep Space Nine, you don't have spare clothes. You're like, okay, Ryan, too, you stay here, do the podcast. I gotta go and travel.
yeah, so we're going to do our picks tonight. I am, of course, Ryan Gilchrist along with.
Tampa Motor about Joel Verlin.
And diving into week number 4, the first game is Detroit and Green Bay. Some breaking news. Aaron Jones and Christian Watson are both officially active tonight. And that is very,
Do you
very good
still
news.
sit Aaron Jones?
I think you play Aaron Jones because the other options have been very, very bad. David Montgomery officially active as well. Not a surprise in that one. Ah, yeah. Can't focus on fantasy trades right now. All right, let's just go right into the picks tonight. Green Bay hosting Detroit. Detroit is a road favorite for the first time in about 40 years in Green Bay. For Detroit, I think David Montgomery goes back in your lineup as well as Jahmyr Gibbs. Sam Laporta has to be a must start as he is the tight end number 2 on the season for fantasy points. Amon-Ra St. Brown also going to be in your lineup. Jared Goff, if you need a streaming option, is available as well. For Green Bay, I think you play Aaron Jones. I think you can play Musgrave at tight end. We had a question in the last one. Does he get a touchdown? Neither one of us think he does, but he can still be viable at the tight end position, which is not saying a whole heck of a lot. And then for the wide receivers, I think both Dobbs and Christian Watson are playable. My concern with Watson is he's not 100% and he could still be on a snap count, but Dobbs has to be in your lineup. This is a big game for first place early in the season between these two teams in the NFC North. Who gets the job done?
Yeah, you're looking at right now the Packers feasted on a Saints team that collapsed spectacularly. I think Lions will fight for both halves and emerge victorious here on what hopefully won't be yet another crappy Thursday night football game as Jordan Love's prime time coming out gets spoiled by a Lions roar and a sun god.
Well, I've got this little cheesehead right here. And you know what? No! They're losing tonight. Detroit's going to take care of business. They're going to take first place in the division outright for what seems like the first time in forever. And I think this is going to be a real coming out party for the Detroit Lions. I think they're going to establish themselves as the kings of the North. And Detroit gets a big, big road win in Green Bay. Remember, they won this game in Green Bay last year for Aaron Rodgers' last game as a Green Bay Packer. So I think this can be done again. I'm going to take Detroit as well. And we move on to Sunday as my sad little cheesehead's just on the floor over there. Poor cheesehead. Next up, Atlanta at Jacksonville. Atlanta, a very disappointing loss to the Detroit Lions last week. The Jacksonville Jaguars, a more disappointing loss to the Houston Texans last week. Atlanta 2-1, Jacksonville 1-2. For Atlanta, you're going to play Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. Very risky flex play, but if they get up against Jacksonville, we saw Houston get up on Jacksonville. He's going to get enough work. He's going to be fine. And then Drake London's about the only other option you have, and I don't recommend it because you have Desmond Ritter throwing the ball, and Desmond Ritter is bad. For the Jaguars, it's going to be Travis Etienne in your lineup, Calvin Ridley in your lineup, Evan Engram in your lineup. Atlanta's got a pretty solid defense. This might not be the best start for one Trevor Lawrence, for a Christian Kirk. So end of the list might be Engram and Ridley and Travis Etienne. Big, big ramifications if the Jaguars lose this game, falling to 1-3 in a very deep AFC, and possibly even two back of the Colts, depending on how their matchup goes. Who gets the win?
Yeah, speaking of crappy games, we're free of the Monday doubleheaders, but we're cursed still with an early Sunday London game, the kind of game everyone's going to be waking up like, if there's already a game on. What? Yeah, Blarg as Jacksonville, I think, rights the ship somehow and leaves the Falcons leaving blank stares and looks on their faces like pretty much anybody who started Bijan Robinson last week. Yeah, hopefully Jacksonville will be awake, unlike whatever the heck that was last week on picking the Jags.
Jacksonville is very used to playing in London. They've done it every year for the last 5 or 6 years at least. This game will also be on Disney Plus, where the players are made into Toy Story looking characters, so that'll be interesting. I'm gonna
Calvin,
take.
don't bet on any games.
Yeah, it might be legal over there, but don't do it. I'm gonna take Atlanta in this one. I just think their defense is good, and they've been more impressive for the most part this season. The loss to Houston last week was really concerning. It's one thing to lose to the Chiefs, it's another to lose to Houston, especially by 20. Maybe Houston's a lot better than we think. We'll get to the game in a little bit. But as of now, Atlanta stood toe-to-toe with a couple teams that, Green Bay looks like they're pretty good. Detroit took care of business, but it wasn't a blowout by any means. So I'm going to take Atlanta, and we'll move on to the game of the week. And I don't think it's very close. Miami Dolphins going to Buffalo to play the Bills. The Dolphins coming off a 70-point explosion against Denver. Buffalo coming off a 34-point win over Washington. These teams combined for an 84-point margin of victory last week. Possibly the biggest of all time between two teams going up against each other next week, if stats like that are kept. For the Dolphins, start everybody. Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle back from the concussion. You can start Achane. You can start Mostert. If they are a viable option on the offense, you play them. For the Bills, you're going to play Allen. You're going to play Stephon Diggs. I wonder if you want to play James Cook. The Dolphins' run defense has looked a lot better of late, even going up against some decent options like Ramondre Stevenson and Javonte Williams. But definitely in flex consideration. And then Gabe Davis can always get behind the defense and cause some havoc, but he is a boom-bust play. Tight end Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, if you are desperate, both options as well. These are the two highest scoring offenses in football. Buffalo's defense has been very good. Miami's defense has been improving steadily since week 1 against the Chargers, who have one of the best offenses in football as well. So, big game for both. Miami can take an early stranglehold on the division. Buffalo can show Miami's, who's still in charge in the AFCs, who gets the job done.
As Miami is pretty pumped after a historic week, but Buffalo is not Denver. Miami fights well, even in Buffalo, as we've seen, but the Bills Mafia will remind the Fish that this is not their territory, and though Miami will fight proudly, 'tis will not be their day, as I think Tua might. We have to wonder if he'll be able to do one of those shovel passes on the Buffalo defense. Maybe not as easily. I think Salty Tua might be coming back to a post-game presser near you. It's going to be a well-fought game. Definitely game of the week, but got to give Bills just a little bit of an edge given Miami's record in Buffalo in recent times.
I've heard a lot of Buffalo fans saying, "We're not Denver. We'll show you. We're not Denver." No one's saying you're Denver. We beat New England. We beat the Chargers. You've beaten the Raiders, Washington, and lost to Zach Wilson and the Jets. You don't get to say Miami hasn't played anybody when yours is that much worse. I honestly think Miami's offense is not stoppable right now. I think whatever Mike McDaniels has put into place, teams have not figured it out. They've won week 1 primarily through the air, week 2 primarily on the ground, week 3 deadly balanced, and it just the second Achane touchdown on the flip, the right-handed flip from Tua, there was an offensive lineman just blocking air because there was no one within 7 yards of him as Achane walked into the end zone. They're scheming defenses where they don't know what to do and opening up something. Tua's had 1 sack and 3 hits so far through 3 games. And by the way, they're getting healthier. Armstrong coming back, Phillips coming back, Waddle coming back. I think Buffalo is going to come in very, very cocky because they had a nice win and they're the Bills. And we believe it's our time. In Miami, even though they put up 70, they were respectful about not blowing the doors off of Denver, putting that extra field goal up. They scored their last couple of touchdowns with backups and one of them trying to run out the clock, and they just let them go. So I think Miami's going to come in a lot more humble than Buffalo, even though they just stomped the Broncos. And they're going to take care of business in this one, and they're going to put up another big offensive number. That Dolphins defense, if they can stand tough in this game, I think they become the favorites to win the Super Bowl. at least to represent the AFC if they can put a good whooping on Buffalo this week. So first disagreement, I'm taking Dolphins. I don't think I could have not done that, saying I'm still all decked out in the Dolphins gear. They put up 70. They get the jersey next week. Next up,
we go to a game that's not the game of the week.
Yes, this is not the polar opposite, but it's close. We'll get to the polar opposite next.
Yeah,
Minnesota
that's
at Carolina. Both teams 0-3. Minnesota, though, has looked decent, at least offensively. Their defense, not so much. Carolina looked a lot better with Andy Dalton, but they're going to let Bryce Young play if he is healthy. For this one, I think you can play Madison. Cam Akers not going to be fully entwined into the role yet. You're going to play Justin Jefferson. You should be playing Kirk Cousins, who is one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks on the season. Jordan Addison is in flex consideration. TJ Hawkinson's the number 1 tight end in fantasy. You need him in your lineup. For the Panthers, it's going to be Miles Sanders, Adam Thielen, both flex to depth. You know, if you have a 3 wide receiver league or multiple flex, both of those need to be in consideration, probably both in your lineup. And that's probably about the end of the list for the Panthers. Both teams 0-3, 0-4, you're done. Goodbye. Write your season off. You're not going to make the playoffs at that point. 0-3 is hard enough. Who gets the win?
Somebody has to win this spit show as long as Captain Kirk remembers, despite the freaking ball, when it's the 2-minute drill in the 4th, Minnesota should be able to claw their way out of the darkness and send the Panthers deeper into the abyss. I'm picking the Vikings.
I'm taking the Vikings as well. They have looked like the better team. They stood toe-to-toe with the Chargers, with the Eagles, and with the Bucs team that is 2-1, been a little more impressive than we expected. The Panthers have lost to Atlanta. They just haven't been as impressive, and I'm going to take Minnesota as well. Speaking
of abysses,
we go to the worst game of the season, I'm going to say.
Tank Bowl.
I mentioned Miami and Buffalo last week had a combined margin of victory of plus 84. This matchup has a combined minus 81 from last week as the Broncos favored by 3.5 in Chicago to face the 0-3 Chicago Bears. Both of these teams looked horrific last week, but Chicago's looked bad in all 3. Denver was at least close the first 2 before getting the doors blown off of them. Fantasy-wise,
doors and everything else blown off them.
Fantasy-wise, these are 2 very bad defenses. So Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, as ugly as it's been early on, if they can't do it this week, they can't do it at all. If you have Justin Fields, this is got to be your last opportunity to play him. If he comes out and he is a turd in this game, he's going to be a turd on the waiver wire come Monday or Tuesday, whenever you can drop him. I think you got to play Cortland Sutton. DJ Moore is at least in consideration. And then Marvin Mims is a dart throw. Jerry Jeudy is a dart throw as well. It's hard to predict when you have 2 bad, all-time level of bad teams like you do in this matchup.
Yeah.
You know, is it going to be a Khalil Herbert game? Is it Javonte Williams going to finally get going? There are so many things that could go well for teams in this game that they will find a way to screw up because it's the Broncos. It's the Bears who somehow is going to get a win in this game.
Yeah, you've got Sean Payton going, what's the question? You have the Bears. The Bears. Just Justin Fields openly saying coaching is the reason why he's playing, as he is defensive coordinator, resigning under curious circumstances. He even had the Bears facility broken into and had about $100,000 worth of equipment stolen. It hasn't exactly been a banner week by any stretch of the imagination for that franchise. Speaking of the Spit Shows Part 2, no way in all the level of Hades is Sean Payton going to get blasted by the Dolphins and then lose to the Bears. No bleeping way. As if the Broncos somehow do lose, I think Vance Joseph has to be getting fired like immediatamente. I've got to pick the Broncos because, good God, they have to win sometime, right?
At some point, professional pride has to come into play, and you just got, I think the term I heard is 70 steamer dropped on you, a 70 steamer dropped on you, because there's no 70 burger. It's worse.
Obliterated, decimated, stomped.
You went in the game, and I remember before the game, the commentator, Denver's coming in real confident. They think they're close. They believe they're going to shock the world this week. and they were wrong.
Yeah,
So
they shocked the world, all right.
I think the professional pride is going to come out. Denver's going to come in with a different level of focus than they've had because, well, you got smacked around. You don't want to do that again. In Chicago, fortunately for them, you don't have to be perfect to be good enough. Chicago, I think, is an absolute lost cause. I think they are firmly looking to get rid of Justin Fields at the end of the season and start over with Caleb Williams if they can get that number 1 overall pick. Once again, so I'm going to take Denver as well. This is not going to be a game you want to watch. If you have 2 TVs that can show 4 games each, as they show you on YouTube TVs, NFL Sunday
This
Ticket.
one might be the little
This is
picture,
one.
the little very microscopic picture one.
This is the one you don't put on. This is the one you're like, oh, I'll just have 2 copies of the Miami Buffalo game. So
This is the
whichever
one
feed I'm
you're
looking, I
keeping
can
track
see
of score alerts.
This could be anywhere from a 9-6 game to a 45-42 game. And I mean it 100% and anywhere in between. I have no idea how this game's going to look. And in that case, I'm going to pick the team I think has more pride. Next up, Baltimore and Cleveland, back to good football games. Baltimore and Cleveland both 2-1. The Cleveland defense looked fantastic. Deshaun Watson getting it going for the first time in about 3 years. Deshaun Watson at least has to be considered as a streamable option this week. Jerome Ford, probably going to be a tough matchup, but he's getting enough work where he's got to be considered for your roster and your starting lineup. Amari Cooper in your lineup for sure. For the Ravens, Zay Flowers going to have a tough matchup, but he's proven he can be good. Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson as well in your lineup. Outside of that, this is going to be a very defensive game, I believe. So who gets the win and the early leg up on the other end of it?
Yeah, Baltimore is literally hobbling into this matchup as you wonder which roster is bigger, the main one or the injury report. Cleveland runs wild and the Ravens continue to look human, especially after last week's cluster against the Colts. You're still trying to figure out how the Colts got it to the overtime and then won. So that was the freaking Colts. Get it together, Harbaugh. I'm going Cleveland.
I'm taking Cleveland as well. I think the defense has been very, very good so far this season. I think Nick Chubb's injury could have broken this team apart, but I think it was a galvanizing force. They came together. They've said, hey, the rest of the season is for Nick. We love Nick Chubb. We're going to dedicate our performances to him. And so far, they've looked very, very good with a dominant win over Tennessee. They can go in and dominate Buffalo. I think they stamp their place on top of the division as possibly the best team in the AFC North. Speaking of the AFC North, another team at 2-1 is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their offense has looked horrendous, but they go to Houston to play the 1-2 Houston Texans, coming off a very impressive 20-point win over the Jacksonville Jaguars. For the Steelers, I think your defense is considered, but they've been a little disappointing. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren both considered. I think you want to play Harris. Houston's run defense is terrible. You got to think they're going to focus on the ground game. And then George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth at least considered once again. For Houston, CJ Stroud has been fantastic through 3 games. Streamable option, not necessarily a slam dunk to start, but he should be started in at least super flex and 2 quarterback leagues. Dameon Pierce, the rushing defense for Pittsburgh has not been what you're expecting. This could be a good week for a bounce back, but again, that offensive line has been very bad. Tank Dell, the wide receiver for the Houston Texans, has been exploding. His share has gone up for targets and routes run. He looks to be the one on that team, and he has been getting better and better every week. He's at least got to be considered. I know I'm starting him in Dynasty League this week over Terry McLaurin. Yeah, I said that. So, big game for both. Houston can go to 2-2. Pittsburgh trying to avoid going back to 500. And knowing that Baltimore, Cleveland are playing, they have to win to keep pace unless it's a tie in the other game, which we hope not. Who gets the job done?
In this case, I've got to pick the Steelers, who finally look, what's that word? Competent. They look like a professional team. Everyone is saying Stroud, including you, is for real, but so is that Steelers defense. I'm picking Steelers with a nod to Coach Tomlin. I like their mojo this week.
I'm taking Houston. I'm buying into the fact that I think Jacksonville is a better team than Pittsburgh talent-wise. I'm buying into the fact that Houston's been very competitive. They looked decent against Baltimore in their first game of the season. CJ Stroud looked a little bit lost as a rookie would, but Baltimore's a very good defensive team. Looked a little bit lost, but he got it going. Then against Indianapolis, they got it going. And then last week, it all kind of came together. I think this is a team that's on the rise, and I don't trust the Pittsburgh offense. I think if Pittsburgh's defense doesn't at least score one touchdown, possibly needing to set up with a couple short fields for field goals, if not another touchdown, Pittsburgh's going to have a hard time putting up points in this game. And I just have this weird feeling at Houston, they're going to start surprising some teams. I don't know if it's a playoff caliber team in a deep AFC, but Houston's going to be a factor in that divisional race by either beating teams that have a shot to win that division late or by being in it by themselves. And they could snake bite a team that's battling for a wild card spot late in the season when they just happen to beat them in a game you're not expecting. So I'm going to take Houston in an upset. All right, next up, the Los Angeles Rams go to Indianapolis to play the Colts. For the Rams, you have to stay with pretty much everybody. Matt Stafford's at least a streamable option. Kyren Williams in your starting lineup. Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell have been so heavily targeted. This might be the last week you can rely on them to get the numbers they have been because Cooper Kupp, his IR stand or PUP list stay, is eligible to end next week. We'll see if it does. And then Tyler Higbee at tight end could be an option as well. For the Colts, it looks like it's going to be Anthony Richardson. Good fantasy option against streamable. Zach Moss has been too good to just ignore. I don't think this matchup is good for him, but he's got to be at least considered. And then you've got Pittman and Joshua Downs have been very good for that receiving core as well. So not necessarily anybody you have to play from the Colts side other than maybe a Zach Moss, but at least a lot of consideration. Rams 1-2, Colts 2-1. Who gets the win?
Yeah, looking at this one, both teams coming off of absolutely ugly games. Rams had an ugly loss. Indy had an ugly win. Rams are looking to bounce back, but I don't think boss can be boss again with this matchup. And Jonathan Taylor still wants out, and I want out of picking Indianapolis in this game. I'm going Rams.
We'll see what happens with Jonathan Taylor. His public stay is also eligible to end after this week. The Colts still don't want to give him a long-term contract. He doesn't want to play for the Colts unless they get a long-term contract. But I think one of his potential trade destinations in Miami might not be as interested now as they were 4 weeks ago. So we'll see what happens with that. That could be the end of Zach Moss as a whole if they decide, hey, we're going to play out this year in the contract, and we'll deal with that later. I'm also taking the Rams. I think the Rams are the better team. Indianapolis has gotten by a little bit of a rain issue, some weather kind of hindering the Baltimore Ravens last week. And then I just think the Rams are the better team in this one. I think Kyren Williams gets back going, and this offense looks much better prior to the return of Cooper Kupp. Moving on to Joel's favorite game of the week, Tampa Bay at New Orleans. Both teams 2-1, both teams coming off of losses. Tampa Bay, Mike Evans is in your starting lineup for sure. Chris Godwin's a flex consideration. Rachaad White, probably running back 2 or flex consideration. Cade Otton at tight end. This is going to be a tough matchup. In fact, Mike Evans has traditionally been very bad against the New Orleans Saints, so maybe Mike Evans does not have to be played. If you draft him where I know everybody had to draft him, he's in your lineup, but might not be his best week because Marshawn Lattimore tends to shut him down. For the Saints, Alvin Kamara coming back. I think if you're going to go in the backfield, that's where you go. It's Alvin Kamara. I don't think you take the chance on Jameis Winston, but Chris Olave has to be in your lineup for sure. Early division matchup for the top spot in the division. Who gets the win?
Yeah, because we all tend to remember just that whole crazy sequence of events where back when Jameis Winston was on the Bucs, and for some reason he was taunting Lattimore, and then they kind of got into it. Then out of absolutely nowhere, Mike Evans just came in and blasted the living snot out of Lattimore, and that actually, of course, led to Evans being suspended for the next game. So the two definitely have had a history, including another little kerfuffle where they end up going at it and they end up getting ejected. So I think Evans got ejected. Lattimore didn't. Lattimore just ended up getting fined. But there tends to be, as you pointed out, definite history between the two, where all of a sudden, just Evans does not match up well. Lattimore. Lattimore is a well-known trash talker. Evans tends to get into it with him, and that's why. And anytime you see a New Orleans Saints game, all of a sudden that fantasy production just tends to be well below what you have come to expect from Evans, taking into account that he did not have a good Monday night football game against the Eagles. Now it's a short week. A little bit of a disappointment going up against the Saints. The Saints are bolstered by the return of Alvin Kamara, who may not be back up to full speed yet. Of course, you have to wonder who's going to be the quarterback. Is it going to be Carr or famous Jameis? So, yeah, still tough matchup. I think the Saints, by and large, are the better team. They have a better defense. Our main weapon has a potential to be nullified by Lattimore, so they may shift the game script to Godwin. You almost never know how it's going to go, but I don't know. Just after that Monday night football, and since the entire Bucks defense tends to go through Evans right now, and he might be nullified, I've got to just a little bit think about the Saints in this case. I mean, yeah, I don't have as much confidence in the Bucks as I did after that Monday night game.
Yeah, the question here is, do you have more confidence in the New Orleans defense or Jameis Winston? Because I don't think there's a scenario where New Orleans dominates this game offensively and defensively. I think either Jameis is going to come out and be great, and Tampa's going to have to rise up and beat the Saints defense to be competitive, or the Saints defense is going to do what they've done the first 3 weeks and just keep scoring to a minimum and let Jameis Winston, Alvin Kamara, and the rest of the weapons just be good enough. And I think the second is what we're going to see. I do expect a down game from Mike Evans. You're still going to play him. He's still going to be okay, especially in the PPR. I'll probably get like 6 for 65 and maybe a touchdown if he's lucky. That's actually not a bad game if he gets a touchdown.
Might be more of a Godwin game.
It could be more of a Godwin game. This could be a great place to play Godwin if he's not in your lineup already.
Sure, might do something finally.
But I agree. I think New Orleans defense is just too good, and I think Jameis is going to be good enough. So I'm going to take New Orleans here as well.
Its only good game was against Chicago thus far.
Yeah. Next up, Washington going to Philadelphia to play the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles. Washington got blitzkrieged last week by the Buffalo Bills. It was not competitive, and Philadelphia has not looked up to their normal standards, but they are winning all of their games. Last year, Washington, though, did get a win over Philadelphia. We'll see if Washington can come through. I think Brian Robinson has to be considered. It's a very tough matchup on the ground. We saw them shut down White. We saw them shut down Madison, the Eagles, that is. And we saw them shut down Stevenson. So Robinson's probably too good to bench, realistically. If you drafted him, you probably drafted him to be at least an option. And then at wide receiver, Terry McLaurin has to be considered. But I already said I'm benching him for Tank Dell in a place this week where I'm 3-0, and I want to keep that going just because Philadelphia could shut this offense down in full. Johan Dotson as well in consideration at wide receiver. For the Eagles, you're probably not going to have both of these guys be great and go off, but A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith both in your lineup. DeAndre Swift has to be in your lineup at this point. He's been too good through the last 2 games, and so is Jalen Hurts. For me, Dallas Goedert is not a must start. He might have a great game this week, but he has been horrific through the first 3 weeks, and he's not getting the targets you want him to get in the red zone and downfield. There are a lot of dink and dunks in the in between the 20s. So I'm not playing him. I've got a lot of Sam Laporta that I'm playing over him tonight, and I think that's the right way to go. You might have no other option than to play Dallas Goedert, but not an ideal situation with how he's played this year. Philadelphia does struggle in the division with Washington every now and again, but do they get the job done on Sunday?
Yeah, I think Philadelphia tends to get the revenge for last year's surprise loss to Washington on Monday Night Football. There's a reason why Washington is 26th in positional ranks for quarterback, 28th for wide receiver positional ranks. Yeah, they're, Robinson tends to support them with that running back room, but they're just not being a good team at all. And I think they're going to be embarrassed. And it's hard going against Philadelphia in this instance.
Yeah, I'm taking Philadelphia as well. I don't think there's going to be a blowout. I could see it being like a 24-15, 24-16 type of game. But I just think Philadelphia has too much talent. They will outlast them. But this offense has been concerning. Washington's defense, really not as bad as it sounds after losing 37-3 because the Buffalo defense took advantage of Washington and gave the offense very short fields and very good opportunity to score very easily. So I think this is a closer game, but I think Philadelphia gets the job done. Next up, Cincinnati at Tennessee. Both teams 1-2. A lot of concern about a lot of players in this game. Joe Burrow with the calf injury, T. Higgins with the drop problems, Derrick Henry with the 20 yards last week, the snap count reduction. DeAndre Hopkins has looked terrible. So for this matchup, I think Joe Mixon's going to have a tough go running the ball, but could be a passing game weapon. Jamar Chase finally broke out. If you're going to beat Tennessee, it's through the air, so he and Higgins have to be in your lineups most likely. For Tennessee, oh, God, it's hard to say bench Derrick Henry, but last week was very concerning. I don't think you bench him.
Points.
I don't think you bench him. I don't think you can. He is too talented of a player, but if he has another bad week or he gets out-touched by Tajay Spears or something like that, it could be time to try and bail out before it gets worse. But I think Derrick Henry has a little bit of a bounce-back week because Tennessee looked their best when they gave Derrick Henry 25 touches in week number 2. Who gets the win?
Yeah, I think Cincinnati gets their second game win in a row. Derrick Henry owners, buckle up. Hopefully, it's not another disappointing week. Hopefully, please. Remember when the Titans were good? Pepperidge Farm remembers. I'm going Cincy.
Now, I do want to prove something here. The Titans so far have played Tennessee. They've played New Orleans. Very good defense that we've talked about. They've played the Chargers. Not a good defense. Won the game. Derrick Henry's best game. Then they've played the Browns. Good defense. Now they're playing the Bengals, a middle-of-the-road defense. After that, though, Indianapolis, Baltimore, bye week, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Tampa. I mean, it gets better for the running attack. So I don't think you bail out on Derrick Henry, but it is getting to be a little bit alarming. I'm taking Cincinnati as well. I just think they are the better team. We saw them get the job going, get things going in the right direction last week on Monday night against the Rams. And I just kind of think Joe Burrow is going to have enough to pass the ball, to be effective enough to beat Tennessee in what should be a very competitive, probably fairly low-scoring 21-20 type of game. And we move on to the two teams in the AFC West who are 1-2, the Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers coming off a big win, Vegas coming off a gut-wrenching loss to Pittsburgh. I think this is the week Josh Jacobs gets going. The Chargers defense is nothing to be worried about. We saw Alexander Mattison have his best game of the season, and it wasn't even close. I think Devontae Adams is going to have a very good game as well. We'll see who the quarterback is. I kind of have a feeling Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get back and play in this game, but even if they don't, they will have at least enough confidence to get the ball moving. For the Chargers, Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, definitely in the lineup. Austin Eckler, if he plays, that's the big question mark right now. If he plays, he's in your lineup. If not, I don't think you worry about Joshua Kelly. He's been doo-doo the last couple of weeks in relief of Austin Eckler. This could be a very interesting game. These two divisional rivals tend to go higher scoring in the most part, so should be a good one. Who gets the much-needed win?
Yeah, because Battle of California Chargers, even with all the injuries, Mike Williams and Austin Eckler are still the better team. QB questions plus Josh Jacobs still trying to return his level of excellence from last season that we have yet to see. I don't have a lot of confidence in the Raiders, unless they prove me wrong. Got to go Chargers.
I'm going to take the Chargers as well. I do think Josh Jacobs has his breakout game and keeps this one close. I think he's had 3 weeks now to get back into game shape, get back into game speed. Hey, his preseason timeline just came to an end. And I think the Chargers are the greatest team you could run into when you need to get right offensively because their defense was not great. I'm going to take the Chargers in what should be a very close game. But remember, the Chargers know how to lose games better than almost anybody not named the Minnesota Vikings this year in dramatic fashion. Next up, New England at Dallas. New England's first win of the season came last week against the Jets. Dallas's first loss came against Joshua Dobbs and the Arizona Cardinals. For the Patriots, Hunter Henry. I think that's about end of list for fantasy options you really want to play. Ramondre
boy.
Stevenson, you probably draft him and have to play him, but tough matchup against Dallas for Dallas. Tony Pollard, you saw Raheem Mostert gut this team a couple weeks ago. I think they'll be good with Tony Pollard, CeeDee Lamb as well. End of list. It's not a big fantasy game because both these teams have very good defenses. Dallas, man, did they let the country down last week? New England did what they were supposed to do against Zach Wilson and the Jets. Who gets the win?
It's hard to pick New England here, but a lot of chatter about how much Zeke will spill about his former mates. You still have to pick dim boys, but if they lose here, oh boy.
I'm going to take Dallas as well. I'm torn on this one. I see a very realistic possibility for New England to come in and defensively just dominate this game. But I think Dallas has too much firepower, and coming off that loss, they're going to come in angry. They're going to come in ready. It is a home game, so I think they'll be just fine. And I think Dallas takes care of business.
I think both of us are going to agree on this next one.
Well, I mean, you say that, but Arizona's been very competitive through 3 weeks. They should have beaten the Giants. They should have won in week number 1 as well. And they're playing San Francisco. Now, San Francisco looks like a just complete juggernaut team. Had it not been for Miami putting up 70, I don't think there'd be a whole lot of debate on who the best team in football really is, because San Francisco's looked like a great offensive team, a great defensive team. Miami, all-time offense, still waiting to see if that defense is for real. But San Francisco's just been steady. They're going to put up 2 touchdowns with Brock Purdy through the air. They're going to put up a rushing touchdown with Christian McCaffrey, make some good defensive plays, end up with 30-plus points. That's going to happen. That's what they do every week. Now, the Cardinals, well, we'll see. Hollywood Brown did pop up with a thumb injury today, but if he plays it in your lineup, because you can still beat San Francisco's defense a little bit. And then
he's been surprisingly good.
He has been. James Conner also in your lineup for the Cardinals. Probably end the list at that point. If you need a tight end option, Zach Ertz is there. For the 49ers, Deebo Samuel's going to be listed as questionable. Brandon Ayuk still coming off that shoulder injury, probably going to be back as well. George Kittle, we'll see. I know you're going to play Christian McCaffrey. You're probably going to play both the wide receivers with Samuel and Ayuk. If all 3 of those guys are playing, George Kittle, probably a very risky play. He's going to be in your lineup, but you're not going to like the results. He seems to be the odd man out whenever he plays. San Francisco 3-0 looks absolutely dominant, but Arizona has been a very surprising, competitive team. Who gets the win?
Yeah, it's San Francisco isn't Dallas, and I know Arizona is definitely competitive, but I think San Francisco smacks them around. I'm going Niners.
As much as I would love to go for Arizona here, I can't. I have to take the San Francisco 49ers. They're just too talented for me to see the route where Arizona can pull the upset. Maybe they're competitive. They keep this a little bit lower scoring game, but I just think San Francisco, all in all, just has too much talent, too many weapons, too good on defense, and they get the job done. Moving on, Kansas City at the New York Jets. Hate to say it, but you're going to see a lot more of Taylor Swift this week because she will be at the game. And if you like football, that's not ideal. Anyways, on the field, Pat Mahomes in your starting lineup, Travis Kelce in your starting lineup. And for the Jets, Garrett Wilson, I think, is good enough to be started still, but it's real rough. Maybe a Breece Hall, but it's a tough one to say anybody for the Jets until either Zach Wilson improves, which isn't going to happen, or they get someone else in there at quarterback. Kansas City looked like Kansas City of old last week against the Bears. They're playing another bad team this week. Do they look just as good, or is this a trap game?
Yes, try not to grow too much. As I think that Kansas City should swiftly beat the Jets. Hopefully, we will see less shots of you know who. And the Jets are apparently stuck with Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian. I saw a statement that that's pretty much all that they have planned for, even though some people have talked about Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, yada. Yeah, have fun with that, Jet fans. I know everybody was expecting Aaron Rodgers. They were expecting to go to the Super Bowl. Nah, you're going to get Kansas City coming in and whooping you. That's what's going to happen.
Week 1, the Giants had Sunday Night Football at home, followed up by the New York Jets at home on Monday night. This week, the Jets are on Sunday night. The Giants are on Monday night. It went horrifically for the New York teams in week number 1. The the Jets did at least come back and win that game, but they lost Aaron Rodgers and arguably any shot at a good season. I think this mirrors more that Cowboys-Giants game from week 1, and the Chiefs just steamroll the Jets. The Jets are in a very dysfunctional situation right now. The
Sort of like
culture is
Casey's
falling
going
apart.
to be like Pac-Man going waka 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 waka.
Yeah,
waka.
but there is no ghost. They are always blue, and they're just going to steamroll. I just think the Jets are in too bad a shape. I mean, there's infighting in the locker room. They don't want to play for Robert Saleh because he's on board with Zach Wilson as the starter. It's just all in all a bad situation, and it's not going to get any better. And I think Kansas City just blows the doors off of the Jets. And I think they show Taylor Swift in the box more times than the Jets score points.
They should have like a Taylor Swift counter.
I guarantee if you want to find a prop bet for it, they'll give you a line. Because I'm telling you, they're going to cut to the box with her more often than the Jets score in total points. If the Jets score more than 10, I'd be shocked.
Might be more entertaining than the Jets offense.
I would think so. Next up and last up, Seattle at the New York Giants. Seattle is 2-1 after winning the last 2. The Giants finally got on the win column in week number 2 with a big come from behind win and then got smacked by the San Francisco 49ers. For Seattle, this is a good spot for pretty much everybody. Geno Smith, Walker, Metcalf, Lockett, all going to be in your lineup. Even Charbonnet could get involved as well. The Giants, we don't know about Saquon Barkley yet. He's day to day. We'll see what happens. It's not going to be fun to wait if you have him in fantasy, so you probably want to go the other way. Don't worry about him. Put someone else in that lineup. Kind of like what you did with Joe Burrow last week when you weren't sure if he was going to play. It worked out for you if you did that. And then it's going to be Darren Waller. I think that's about it for fantasy options in this game. Seattle and the Giants, who gets the win?
Yeah, it's only one game. Hallelujah on Monday night. Finally, we're back to a normal schedule. And I think Giants put up some fight, but Seattle is just the better of the two teams here. And hopefully Jones and Waller don't suck again for fantasy. Please, please, please don't suck again. Going Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Seattle Seahawks here as well. The Giants just don't look like a competent offense. Seattle's defense is not exceptional, so maybe it's a high-scoring game. Something entertaining, hopefully, but I just think the Seahawks have too much firepower, and they'll get it done at the back end of this game. So, with that, Joel with a 9-7 week last week. I was 10-6, picked up a game. He is still up 30-18 to my 26-22.
I have a special final thought, if I may.
Final thoughts, yeah.
Yeah, this is actually comes from the user on Reddit. I am
back-to-back shows. During the final thought, Joel disappears. Normally when he disappears, I can cover and be like, oh yeah, we're talking about this game. When it comes to final thoughts, I have no idea what he is talking about. So yeah, we'll wait for him to come back. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Batting 1,000 on final thought droppings tonight.
All
Joel.
right, and take 2 action on final thought. Of course, this is from the Reddit user I am bot beep boop, as we're actually going to try to get this out here without dropping from the known existence in the continuum. Has a post week 3, 0.5 PPR. This is the lowest realistic fantasy team. Are you ready, Flying?
Oh yeah.
QB Joe Burrow 9.2. RB, sad noises. Derrick Henry 2.0. RB2. Breece Hall 3.2 plus Twitter postings. Wide receiver 1, Devonta Smith 4.8. Wide receiver number 2, T. Higgins 3.1. Tight end Hunter Henry 2.1. And flex, that would be 1, Drake London 4.1 for a grand total of, are you ready, 29.1 fantasy points.
Yeah, I'll stick with the final thought similar. You mentioned a terrible lineup to play in fantasy right there. There are teams and new people to fantasy football that don't realize you're supposed to just get the best players you can on whatever teams. Don't pick your team. I've often said don't go and just draft. Like, I don't enjoy drafting Dolphins players unless they are Tyreek Hill or Tua or Jalen Waddle, who I know is going to produce, because If not, I feel like I'm picking them just because they wear the colors and the logo that are my team. However, if you were a big Homer Dolphins fan this week and you said, I'm going to draft only Dolphins, you probably would have won any fantasy matchup this week, as Tyreek, Achane, Mostert, and Tua would have put up almost 200 combined points, let alone when you add in Brooks, you add in Barrios, you add in all these other guys.
Somebody else did the same thing. And all Miami Dolphins fantasy team would have scored 185.46 points in half PPR.
Yeah, so full PPR, you're well over 200. I was thinking 200 with the full PPR, but how many half-point teams are you saying are going to put up 188 in a week? One of the few times when just being a complete homer will get you a win in fantasy football. Probably not going to work out most weeks, but that one was.
Can you imagine DFS?
Oh my God, yeah. If you had the stones to say, I'm going to play Achane, Mostert, and Tyreek Hill, and then hypothetically you're like, well, I need to get something with a lot of upside, I'm going to take Keenan Allen. Like, oh man, there's some lineups out there that could be absolutely insane. But whew. Anyways, that is our time. Football on in about an hour, not quite an hour. And then, yeah, we'll be back next week. Oh, it's going to be a long weekend. Next week we'll get back to a normal schedule. We'll do all of this separate from each other. And I am playing Ryan Gokers along with
Tampa Motormouth Joel Vroom.
Enjoy the football and the cringe known as the Taylor Swift camera cutaway. With that.